We are continuing the series on pre-railroad Greensburg, and we're looking at an area that has something missing. If you're looking at that area right now, you would have a great big railroad embankment and railroad tracks. You would have an arch here where Arch Street goes underneath the railroad. You'd have a culvert over here to take Jack's Run underneath the railroad. But this is before any of that happened. This is maybe around 1820 or so. And you have here, what I'm pointing out is the Jack Brickyard over in here where the road splits. On the other side of what's now Arch Avenue, the road used to split to go to New Alexander and Salzburg. And the Jack family owned a lot of property over here, and they had a brick yard, a place where they made bricks. This is what the old brickyards looked like. This was an updraft kiln. I remember excavating one of these down at Leedsdale, and there wasn't much of it left by the time I got there. It was mostly underground, but they were very crude things, but they did work. The unfortunate thing is they damaged a lot of bricks in the process. You lost a lot of bricks, but you made enough. This back here would have been the drying house. When you made bricks, they had a lot of water in them, and you had to dry them out in a place where the temperature wasn't so high. And that meant you had to dry them out before you put them in the kiln. This is what that real estate looks like now. We're looking at sheets down there where the road split, 119 and 819, I guess. In the background here is the railroad embankment, now all covered with trees. This was the mill that the Jacks owned. It had been built by the Best family, and then around 1818 the Jack family got hold of it, and it had a mill dam, and right where that mill dam was is where the railroad now goes through. There's a big railroad embankment put on that, and mills were very useful structures, places in the old days, because they ground grain that the people could use to make their bread from. I mean, the flour. Also, they could grind up grain for chop to feed animals, and they could also grind it up prior to distilling it, because if you distilled grain, you had to grind it a bit first. The old mills were also useful because most of them had an up and down sawmill, and the people needed housing. And so they had the old mill attached to a up and down sawmill. Not a very quick way to cut a board, but it worked. This is what I was showing. This is the mapping. This was the old Jack mill on Jack's Creek. Over here was the Coulter steam mill. This was the first steam mill in Greensburg. Eli Coulter put a steam engine in that in 1826. Eli Coulter was the second of that name. His father, Eli Coulter Sr., had been the person who ran the boundary line between Westmoreland County and Allegheny County. That's when Allegheny was created, in Washington County. Eli Coulter married Rebecca Alexander. Rebecca Alexander's brother was J.B. Alexander, the fellow who made this map in 1820. Also of interest is the fact Eli Coulter was invested in a brewery that was up here and breweries needed grain to be ground before it was fermented, and right down the street he had his mill where he could grind that grain. Over here was another brickyard, the Harris brickyard. A guy named William Harris, as early as the 1790s, was making bricks there. This is a picture that I did of Eli Coulter's mill. There is no one alive today who knows what that mill looked like. I do these things only to memorialize them in some form, and not pretending that this is exactly what it looked like. I know what the old mills look like, and I know the terrain there, but we don't know for certain what it looked like, but we have something to recall it by. This was in Ludwig. This was another fellow, Bushfield, Samuel Bushfield, in the 1830s, had a brickyard up there. This is, you can see up here, this is the brickyard. And we will take a look at where that territory is now. We are at the corner of Washington and Otterman up in Ludwig. And up in here, right in here, is where that brickyard once upon a time was located. There was also a tannery located in there. This is another shot showing the old brickyards, the drying house and 2 kilns. Very useful things to have around. They often would burn whatever was available, coal sometimes. Use wood to get it started. I think we're about at time now. We should bring this to a conclusion, and we'll continue later.